The Ask the Experts Theater at CSCMP Edge 24 is sponsored by Canop.
All right, good evening and welcome to Workplace Violence Prevention at Edge 24. We're going to go ahead and get started. I hope people will continue to join us, and please speak up at any time and jump into the conversation. This is an Ask the Experts session, so the more people that talk, the better, and we can get back to the bar. So, quick introduction. My name is Lee Ambrose. I'm the Vice President for Remote Security Solutions. We have logistical sites all across North America, from Mexico to Canada, supply chain nodes from port to retail that we protect. Perimeter protection, managed gate access, and all that good stuff. But today we're going to talk specifically about workplace violence prevention at your logistical sites. I'm a retired Army colonel and Apache pilot, and I've spent my whole life doing this type of activity. And I've been in the commercial sector on corporate security side for the past 4 or 5 years. So a little bit of experience in the area, and unfortunately it's sad to see crime on the rise in our home country. Having fought this type of crime overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan, Eastern Europe, and all the fun places around the globe, it's really sad to see organized crime attacking our supply chain nodes in the U.S. On the south side, on the border, any big city, especially California. We'll talk about some of the stats very quickly, and we'll get right to your questions and discussion. So please raise your hand and I will bring you the mic at any point during this. Couple stats just to get us started on workplace violence. So specifically today we'll talk about anything from domestic violence at your workplace, employees fighting in the parking lot, spouses coming, disgruntled employees that were let go coming back and bringing a weapon, and unfortunately even active shooters. If you take a look at some of the numbers, it's on the rise. It's not if, but when you will be faced with an active shooter with someone you know or yourself or your workplace, unfortunately. But let's talk about what we can do together to take care of our employees and protect everybody in our organizations the best that we can. Looking at some of the stats though, 2022, you can see the numbers for each state, and then at the bottom you can see all the way through 2023, over 200 active shooter only, not just workplace violence, I'm just talking active shooter only, over 200 in between 2019 and 2023 in 44 different states. So it's on the rise, and it's all about, if you care about your employees, what do we do to prepare for that type of unfortunate activity? And again, just breaking it down, active shooter, employee altercations, employee vehicle break-ins. We do a lot of assistance with the unions for some of our larger clients, and working through how do you get your employees into the parking lot quickly and efficiently, but protect their vehicles while they're inside your distribution facility or transfer lot, intermodal lot, rail yard, and then get back to their vehicles safely. And what do they do if they feel unsafe or they see an active shooter? We'll talk about all that today. All right, I'll bring up the big five, what we call the big five. So if we're helping a client with multiple sites, these are the 5 main things that we tell them to look at. And not all of this stuff costs money. It could be doing what we're doing right now, just sitting down with your team and talking about the unique situation at each location and what can we do to prepare. So we do have some of the more advanced technology coming out of the military that's cost effective for commercial applications now, things like counter-drone, drone response, mass notification. It's used on a lot of college campuses and schools, gun detection. We'll get into all that. But just take a quick look at the big 5 steps of things you can do today with your team at your respective locations. 1, just create a plan and policy. Have a crisis management team. Have people, look for your veterans, people that are law enforcement or military that have experience being shot at and what they do when that happens. And then look at your regular training, not just initial entry, but how do we have currency training to continue to educate people? How do we maintain client vendor compliance with 3PLs and multiple trucks coming into our location? and then how do we create and utilize an active violence plan for each site specifically. Any questions thus far? All right, this is my last slide, and I'm going to start asking questions. All right, I'm going to run through some of the more advanced technology and things that you can do on your at your different locations to stop violence in the workplace. So having a plan includes, how do you notify your employees? How do you tell your employees not to come in if there's an active shooter? And then how do you make your employees safe on site? How do you get them inside, lock the doors, notify the police? All those are great questions we'll get into in just a minute. So mass notification, response drones. We use something as simple as QR code signs. We provide our clients signage throughout their employee parking areas, inside and outside, that you could imagine yourself in an active shooter scenario right now. If you were able to hide under your car, get away from the shooter, take a picture of this QR code that goes immediately to my command center in Atlanta. The phone is always picked up on the third ring, and they can see you and they can talk through the loudspeaker system to everybody on site. We can remotely lock all your doors. We can protect the employees inside. We can direct the police to the active shooter. They'll have a picture of the active shooter on their mobile device as they show up as first responders. So now we know where the shooter is. We know who he is, the police know who he is, and your employees can be directed to safety. And that's all just from having a sign. You say, well, why don't you just call 911? Raise your hand if you've tried to call 911 recently. I have. You get put on hold. You get put on hold, and it's automated, and you're trying to run from somebody shooting at you with your phone while you're on hold. It's not a good idea. My phone gets picked up on the third ring or less every time by a trained person that can have eyes on the situation and talk over the speaker system and communicate with your leadership at your company to let them know what's going on, all in seconds. What else? We have counter-drone technology to stop bad drones, which is quickly becoming a vital technology needed for drone delivery. There's quite a few other applications we can get into, but simple things like gun detection software. Unfortunately, we're seeing school shootings. We just had one near our facility in Winder, Georgia, just a couple weeks ago, and it's so sad to see those happening. They're happening in commercial, they're happening in banks, they're happening everywhere. So gun detection software can run on any IPIR camera, whether it's one of ours that I've provided for you or not. I would recommend gun detection software so that immediately, within seconds that a gun is exposed, somebody's alerted, either your own team, your own personnel, your own general manager, or my team, and they're immediately acting on that. Second, save lives. We had, if you look at some of the school shootings, children bled out for 77 minutes before the first responders got there. Simple steps like this can reduce that to a few minutes. All right, so let's get into questions. I'm going to call on somebody if nobody raises their hand.
Yeah, Ryan Howard, VP of Growth with a company called Freightsmith. So when a company's considering moving from maybe a manned situation and going more remote security, what are some savings there, or either headcount or maybe in losses, things like that you see with RSS?
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the question. So we do specialize in remote security, but we have manned guards. Certain government contracts and things of that nature require a person on site, whether you're talking about the CDC or DOD or FEMA activities. Sometimes there's a regulatory requirement. So we have manned guards, but we found them to be way less efficient than doing it remotely. So to give you an example, I won't say the company's name, but a company we all know and work with, we saved them $40 million in 1 year on top of their spend to install all the security equipment after reducing their guard force. So if you have a simple guard shack with a guard, the truck's coming in and out to a DC, just imagine not having to have the 4 or 5 guards you have to keep that man 24/7. We can do all that remotely now. A QR code goes right to your phone, the driver pulls up, scans it. If anything goes wrong, he pushes the one button on the panel, he's talking to a trained cargo specialist security officer in my command center. It lets him in, check seals, check loads, we stop fictitious pickups, and we stop violent activity from coming in, a disgruntled employee, somebody with a gun, anything of that nature as well. So just one example was $40 million in 1 year. That was at scale, so that was probably over 100 sites. But Obviously, that number goes up or down depending on how many sites you do, but it's definitely way cheaper. And we augment guards a lot of times. So if you have a large, like think of the Port of Savannah, I was just down there, and they have about 12 different lanes, trucks coming in and out because it's such a large operation. So we have hybrid solutions that allow, some are automated, like a speed pass, if you will, for trucks, and you have some that are manned, and then you open all lanes during the heavy shifts, and then you reduce that number during the slow time at night. Great question, though. Thank you, Ron. Other questions? Leah, I know you have a question. She was a Marine, so I know she has a security question of some kind.
I don't know that I do, but I bet you do. I know somebody, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
So, Melina Hudson, Director of Transportation, Procurement, and EcoBev Operations for Satellite Logistics, a DHL company. And you mentioned you have prevention methods for fictitious freight movements. So stolen freight based on, just making stuff up. I'd love to hear more about that.
Watch your step there. We have cords across the entryway. All right, so that's a great question as well. She talked about fictitious pickups. So unlike, I would say what sets us apart is the security officers in our command center stop on average 33 criminal activities per night, and that number triples on the weekend nights. And the reason they're able to do that is all of our stuff is proactive, and you're dealing with trained personnel that specialize in supply chain operations. So we're not ADT. These folks are ready to look at bills of lading, the seals. They know when something doesn't feel right, because that's all they talk to is truckers and distribution centers and intermodal sites, and that's all we do. We just do that across the country, and we have a very specialized client type that we work with. So it's a mix of technology and experience and training, to answer your question in short, and we do it all the time. It's thanks to those good people that are on the front line in the command center. How about you, Julie? Do you have a question?
So, no, it's great. So, do you see a certain region or city that has the highest crime rate?
Great question. So do we have areas of interest, let's say, that are higher than others? California, for sure. It is just rampant across all of our sites. Telecommunication, DCs, logistics, intermodal, trucking transfer, rail to line haul transfer lots. It's just rampant in California. And the police response is really slow. And I'm not knocking the police. I thank them every time I interact with a police officer or a security officers, work with them. They're great people, but for whatever reason, underfunded, not enough people to go around, crime on the rise. California is very, very difficult. We've been on hold for over an hour in California, and we send stuff digitally to the 911 call centers. We have the direct line numbers, for example. We meet all the criteria. Like I said, we're not ADT. It's a professional. They know we're calling about a real crime with real criminals on site, and it still can take forever in California. We're seeing some of the response times go up in other areas. Memphis is pretty bad. Atlanta has some bad areas, but we seem to have a quicker response time there. Yeah, Chicago's pretty bad too. And we have trouble sometimes in the Northeast with unions where they don't allow a third-party private company to come in and provide security. So we're trying to work that. But we have government partners in certain areas, a lot of hybrid security to stop workplace violence. If you look at layered security, especially on government sites that have key and critical infrastructure, they may have roving patrols and drone patrols in addition to gates and perimeter protection and workplace violence plans in place, and we do that all the time. We work with other companies that have electric fencing, for example. We've chosen not to produce that ourselves and put it out there because we have a lot of issues with it, but if a company wants that, we recommend a company, we work with them as part of a layered solution for whatever our customer needs, and we're iterating all the time. We still act like a small company, even though we've gotten pretty large. We can put out a new solution, use new technology, find a new partner, and have stuff in testing in the field in like a month, which is pretty quick for a company our size. Right now, we've got units in the back of 18-wheelers. We're putting units in rail cars, mobile units that provide pictures in near real time, anytime the door is open outside the geofence. So all of that can be integrated to your workplace violence. Has anyone here worked with the robot dog or seen it at a trade show or any unmanned aerial systems for this type of security? Anyone here? I see some. I was hoping to hear either some success or failure stories with the new technology on your sites. Nobody? Well, I can tell you about a few of ours. So we all know everybody's looking at using drones for delivery, last mile delivery to your home, security, perimeter patrols, things like that. So we've been using them in the military for the past over 20 years. And the first time I've really seen cost-effective commercial counter drone, we demoed this for Congressman Luttrell in Texas this year, and we're able to take a tripod like that camera, one device, put it on top of your warehouse or your trucking site and secure a whole lot, 3 to 5 kilometer ring, and not let any unknown drones into your facility. It will stop them wherever you draw the border on the digital map, down your fence line, down your property line. It will literally stop any drone on the market and drop it to the ground. And it will freeze the controller of whoever's trying to sneak into your property. It'll freeze their controller. They won't know what's going on, and you'll have their position accurate to 3 feet, and it'll drop that drone at your border. Pretty neat technology. May not be applicable today, but as we begin to start delivering and using drones for more things, it's going to be a requirement. Definitely on some key infrastructure sites and things like that.
Lee, I came in a little late, but what about malls? Yeah. I mean, I could be off, but I'm asking.
Yeah, you mean like workplace violence type stuff at the malls? Oh, well, a lot of malls are going to the exterior corridors now for that very reason. So that leads to a great question. So I'll go back specifically to big indoor arenas type situations, but speaking specifically of outdoor malls, we're seeing a lot of what's called smash and grabs, where the criminals will be part of an organized crime ring, and they're the lowest level, if you will, but it's not just kids having fun. It's part of an organized international ring where it feeds up and goes overseas for things like cell phones. So a cell phone on the black market, $5,000. And you're like, well, I only had to pay $1,000. Why is it worth $5,000? Because the U.S. is the only place you can get an unlocked iPhone. So this thing is gold in the criminal market overseas because it's used as currency. A case of iPhones is used to buy drugs overseas. The cartels want them, the Middle Eastern terrorist organization, everybody wants iPhones overseas. So the low-level folks steal them from your stores or en route when it's going through the supply chain, and then they sell them to their handler who goes overseas, and then they sell them, and it funds drugs, human trafficking. Is tied to so much more than just petty theft. So keep that in mind as you're talking about this kind of stuff. But, so back to your question. The local person who's being paid by the criminal organization steals a car, drives the car through the front of the shopping center mall at night, and crashes into the store, whether it's a Sally Beauty or a pharmaceutical store, anything you can think of, cell phone store, and they try to smash and grab as much as they can, get in another stolen car and drive away all before the police get there. And they're pretty successful at that. So what do you do in that situation? You could have an employee inside doing stock stuff in the back. Sometimes they're armed, not to mention they're crashing through the front in a car. Well, we have a solution for that. One, with our stuff, we know as soon as they're coming, and we try to deter them. That works 98% of the time on average. If that doesn't deter them and they come crashing into your store, we have a fog solution that is instantaneous and fills up from the back to the front and pushes them out. You can't see your hand in front of your face, but it leaves no residue on any of your merchandise. It's non-toxic, doesn't hurt anybody, and it clears out within a matter of minutes. But it stuns them enough that they don't come in the store, and they're either able to be intercepted by the police or first responders, or at a minimum they run away and your store is secure and you only have to fix the glass. All kinds of good stuff like that. Great question. So big malls are a different challenge. So you're talking like a sports arena or a big old school mall or the Opryland Hotel. Yep. So that's where we work with a company and work through everything from what do you do from the incident and backwards plan. So how many people have been through a fire drill? All right, how many people have been through an active shooter drill? Only one, two. So we spend, as companies and organizations, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at each facility, each large facility, on fire safety type requirements and laws. But we don't ever think about active shooter. But yet we haven't lost one child in 50 years in a fire in a school. So think about that and apply like what would have happened on 9/11 had we have been prepared for terrorist threats, active shooters. And I want to go back that far, but just think, what could you do at your facility had you planned for something as simple as remotely locking the doors and gun detection software. Very cost-effective solutions. You identify a gun in the parking lot, you lock the doors, now you've just saved potentially 90% of the lives of your employees. Anybody outside is hearing the announcement, active shooter, not a drill, and they start running away from the shooter and their lives are saved as well. So just simple stuff like that. If we would just think about safety from that perspective, and we just care about our employees enough to think about it and plan. We call it backwards planning in the Army, from the event, backwards plan from the bang, right? And then maybe even shoot back, right? Maybe we can have designated shooters like some churches do across the U.S. that have it in a secure lockbox, and you have trained, safe personnel, same as having law enforcement on site if you do it correctly, that could potentially thwart an active shooter. Because you got to remember this, folks. If you have an active shooter on site, they're not there to steal. They're there to kill as many people and wound as many people as possible. It's a proven fact. And since the 1990s, it's just escalated. And they don't care about your merchandise. They're there to kill you. So whatever you can to save you and your employees' lives during that situation. And it just takes a little bit of prep. All right, how about some of our late arrivals, like Dana from JLL? Would she like to ask a question about workplace violence? Not yet? Okay. Oh, wait, we got a question. Okay.
Hi, can you explain more about the weapons detection?
Great question, great question. So weapons detection software, how does it work and what do you use it for? Couple things to remember just in layman's terms. So it's not a metal detector. It's not like an airport or a scan machine. It won't detect it if it's not visible. But if you look at the research, in almost all the active shooters in recent history, the weapon was exposed for minutes up to hours before the first responder got to the shooter. So in many cases, a bag of some kind is taken out of a car and shrunk in the parking lot under surveillance, cameras on site. And they take the rifle out of the bag or out of the car and they walk with it into the building, right? So anytime a weapon is exposed, you can use simple pixel change detection using a library of known weapons, every known rifle, shotgun, and pistol out there. They've taken a lot of time with the company that we use called Zero Eyes to make sure any angle, any pistol, day or night, thermal imaging or regular IPR cameras, if my sport coat blows open and it catches the butt of my pistol under my sport coat, it'll go off. And then instantly, in near real time, it goes to the Zero Eyes Operations Center, or ZOC, where a guy like me or a girl like me that's trained law enforcement or military verifies it within seconds. Oh, that's a police officer, no threat. So then there's no alert and there's no false alarm. But if it's a real threat, someone like me immediately acknowledges, and that digital information, the picture, the type of weapon, the exact location, is sent through Rapid SOS to the 911 call center, the local 911 call center, so they have pictures, location, and a threat verification immediately, and they're en route. And now they're training all the police forces to go in first, more like a military operation. There's no waiting around, there's no first aid. We find the shooter and we neutralize him first. So that reduces the whole kill chain time, if you will, and protects your folks. First responders, the first aid responders will come in after, behind the police, but they will get there and neutralize the shooter. So all that works together. It's just simple pixel change detection and analytics on the cameras that will pick up those weapons and alert immediately through their system. Zero Eyes is the best one we've seen. It's started by a team of Navy SEALs and Army guys, and they've got a pure heart for saving children in schools, but they have sectors for supply chain and commercial and government as well. But they started in the schools, which I commend them for.
I'm from the great state of Texas, and so we're open carry. How does that work in something of that scenario?
So we are also open carry in Georgia, and I carry myself all the time. So it's pretty easy. So it's just a matter of that verification process again. So like anybody else, especially when we're working with a large company with multiple sites, we have rules for each site, especially for each company, but also sometimes that's broken down to regions, states, or whatever the case may be for your company. And if open carry is something that's common, we will have the facial recognition and the person, some way of determining who is allowed to carry and who is not. And as a private organization or commercial organization, you can say no weapons if you want on your site, even though you're in a state that can be open carry and it's legal. So it's just a matter of working with and we treat all our clients like partners. So we go through this process with them and develop the whole workplace violence prevention program. So we're working with their local security or at least their executives that are in charge of security, and we go through all that with them together. There's a lot more details than just that, but that's a great question. Sir.
Are you using any facial recognition software for either matching with bill of ladings to allow people onto the site?
Great question. So facial recognition, that's a big one. License plate recognition, yes, currently using that. Facial recognition, I would say we're testing. We have the capability, and it's technologically possible. The problem is the privacy rights in the U.S. What database am I going to marry that to? We ran into the same thing in the military. But I would love to have my drone catch a perpetrator approaching a property, call them by name, and say if they climb over that fence, I'm sending police to their mom's house. That would be great. That would stop the 2% that we don't get, right? We get 98% of the time our stuff works. The 2% of the time it doesn't, it's usually a professional. So when they break in, they're on a clock, they're wearing a mask, they come over the fence, they hear the alarm, and they keep moving. We yell at them, they don't even look at the speakers of the camera, they just keep moving. And those guys are professional, they're trained, they know the response time of the police. And that's really hard to stop in a free country because they're good at what they do, unfortunately. So they know the mask, they know the time for the police. And if you're used to an hour response time in California, you're not even in a hurry. You're in there still in catalytic converters rolling from vehicle to vehicle, and you're in and out in 10 minutes, and you have thousands of dollars in stolen catalytic converters, all for the precious metals, and they're all in your backpack, and you're over the fence before anybody can get there, unless it was just they were really unlucky and a policeman was driving by. So then you got to look at other things. So that's where we work with our clients, and we target their specific sites. You do a little bit of data analysis and say, okay, well, we need an electric fence at this site. There's too many attacks and the police response time is too slow, or we need aerial observation, or we need roving patrols. So there's quite a bit you can do, and that's where our man guards come into play as well. Going outside the perimeter, walking around. The best defense, I think, is a good offense. So the analytics are really crazy now. Some of the stuff that you can gather off the number of crimes, like per area, geolocation, the facial recognition, the drone response. Drone in a box is coming a long way too. You can leave it outside, self-sufficient, maintained by the company. It pops out, takes seconds. It even speeds up trucks in and out of automated gates. All right, so I see some eyes glazing over. I think we've hit all the new technology we wanted to talk about. We hit some of the procedural stuff you can do to protect your employees. And we've talked about some just supply chain security. Any other questions anybody wants to talk about today before we hit the bar? All right, well, I of course want to thank the folks from Edge that helped set this up and everybody that came tonight. We appreciate your support, and please come see us at booth 347 just for some free stuff or to have a chat about anything that interests you. Have a great night. Appreciate it.